In the frozen crucible of Middle Pleistocene Europe, between 600,000 and 400,000 years ago, an extraordinary transformation was unfolding, one that would produce perhaps the most successful cold-adapted hominin species in human evolutionary history. The Neanderthal lineage emerged not through sudden mutation or divine intervention, but through the relentless grinding pressure of glacial cycles that tested every aspect of survival. Populations of Homo heidelbergensis, scattered like seeds across the European continent from the sun-baked Iberian Peninsula to the mist-shrouded Caucasus Mountains, found themselves confronting environmental conditions so harsh, so unforgiving, that only the most profoundly adapted would survive to pass their genes forward. This was no gentle evolutionary drift. This was selection at its most brutal and efficient. As massive ice sheets advanced and retreated across the northern latitudes, temperatures plummeted to levels that would kill an unprepared human within hours. The landscape transformed from temperate forests into windswept tundra, where survival depended on every anatomical detail, every behavioral innovation, every calorie extracted from the frozen earth. The ancestral Homo heidelbergensis populations that had thrived during warmer periods now faced an existential crisis: adapt or perish. The transformation occurred gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, across thousands of generations. But the archaeological record preserves snapshots of this remarkable journey. The Cima de los Huesos site in Spain's Atapuerca Mountains stands as a cathedral of evolutionary transition. A limestone cave system that has yielded over 7,000 fossil fragments, representing at least 28 individuals who lived approximately 430,000 years ago. These are not yet fully Neanderthals, but they are no longer Homo heidelbergensis either. They occupy that fascinating evolutionary middle ground where the future is being written in bone and tooth. Examine these skulls closely, and you witness evolution in action. The nasal cavities have begun their dramatic expansion, creating the internal architecture that would eventually warm frigid air before it reached delicate lung tissue. The facial skeleton shows the first hints of the distinctive mid-facial projection that would characterize later Neanderthals. The cranial vault displays increased robusticity, with bone walls thickening to support the massive musculature required for survival in Ice Age Europe. The supraorbital ridges, those prominent brow bones, are developing their characteristic shelf-like projection, creating deep-set eye sockets that would protect vision organs from harsh winds and snow glare. But the Cima fossils reveal something even more profound. These transitional populations were already caring for their sick and injured. Several individuals show evidence of severe disabilities that would have prevented independent survival, yet they lived for years after their injuries. This is not merely anatomical evolution. This is the emergence of complex social bonds, of compassion, of a society that valued its members beyond their immediate productive capacity. The seeds of Neanderthal culture were being planted alongside their distinctive anatomy. The European landscape during this transformative period was a realm of extremes that would challenge every aspect of hominin adaptation. Imagine standing on the edge of a Scandinavian ice sheet during a glacial maximum. A wall of ice stretching to the horizon, kilometers thick, grinding southward with inexorable force. The air temperature hovers at minus 30 degrees Celsius. The wind howls across treeless plains, carrying ice crystals that sting exposed skin like needles. This is not a place for the unprepared. This is a proving ground where only the most exquisitely adapted can survive. Even during interglacial periods when the ice retreated and temperatures moderated, Europe remained significantly cooler than modern conditions. Coniferous forests dominated the landscape, interspersed with vast grasslands and periglacial environments where freeze-thaw cycles created unique ecological niches. The megafauna that roamed these landscapes, woolly mammoths standing 4 meters tall, woolly rhinoceros with horns longer than a human arm, cave bears that could crush bones with their jaws, These were not prey for the timid or poorly equipped. Hunting these animals required not just physical strength, but sophisticated planning, coordinated group action, and weapons technology that could penetrate thick hides and deliver killing blows to massive bodies. The Neanderthal cranial morphology that emerged from these selective pressures represents a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering. Every feature serves multiple functions, creating an integrated system optimized for survival in the harshest conditions. The characteristic projecting midface with its enormous nasal aperture and inflated maxillary sinuses functioned as a sophisticated climate control system. Cold, dry air entering the nasal passages encountered a labyrinth of turbinate bones, thin scroll-like structures covered in mucous membranes that dramatically increased surface area. As air flowed across these warm, moist surfaces, it was rapidly heated and humidified before reaching the lungs. This adaptation prevented two potentially fatal problems: respiratory heat loss that could drain body temperature, and desiccation of delicate alveolar tissue that could lead to respiratory failure. The engineering principles underlying this adaptation are remarkable. The expanded maxillary sinuses created large air-filled chambers that acted as thermal buffers, pre-warming incoming air through heat exchange with surrounding blood vessels. The forward projection of the entire midface increased the distance air traveled before reaching the lungs, maximizing warming time. The enlarged nasal aperture reduced air velocity, allowing more time for heat and moisture exchange. This was not random mutation. This was precision adaptation to a specific environmental challenge. But the Neanderthal skull served purposes beyond respiration. The robust supraorbital ridges and thick cranial bones provided structural support for massive temporalis muscles that generated crushing bite forces exceeding 1,800 pounds per square inch. Why such powerful jaws? Because Neanderthal teeth served as tools as well as food processors. Archaeological evidence reveals distinctive wear patterns showing that Neanderthals regularly used their front teeth to grip materials while working with their hands, processing plant fibers, softening animal hides, manipulating wooden implements. The enlarged incisors, up to 50% larger than modern human equivalents, could withstand these extraordinary stresses without fracturing. The brain case itself housed remarkably large brains averaging 1,520 cubic centimeters, with some specimens reaching 1,750 cubic centimeters, larger than most modern human populations. But size alone tells only part of the story. The shape of the Neanderthal brain differed significantly from modern humans, with the distinctive occipital bun creating additional space for enlarged visual processing centers and cerebellar regions responsible for motor coordination and spatial reasoning. This neurological architecture supported the complex three-dimensional navigation required for traversing varied terrain in low-light conditions, and the precise motor control necessary for manufacturing sophisticated stone tools. Recent neurological research has revealed that the enlarged occipital and parietal regions in Neanderthal brains would have enhanced their abilities in spatial memory, visual processing, and body coordination, crucial skills for survival in complex, dangerous environments. They could remember the precise locations of resources across vast territories, track prey animals through varied terrain, and execute the complex motor sequences required for stone tool production with remarkable precision. Their brains were not inferior to modern humans. They were differently organized, optimized for different cognitive priorities shaped by their unique evolutionary history. The Neanderthal postcranial skeleton represents perhaps the most dramatic example of cold climate adaptation in human evolutionary history. Every bone, every muscle attachment site, every joint surface reflects hundreds of thousands of years of selection for strength, endurance, and thermal efficiency in environments that would prove fatal to less adapted hominins. This was not merely a robust version of modern human anatomy. This was a fundamentally different body plan optimized for survival in conditions that pushed the limits of mammalian physiology. Begin with the long bones. the femurs, tibias, humeri, and radii that form the structural framework of the limbs. Neanderthal long bones achieved extraordinary robusticity through increased cortical thickness and enlarged cross-sectional areas that resisted the bending forces generated by powerful musculature. The femoral shaft walls measured up to 40% thicker than modern human equivalents, creating bones that could withstand tremendous stress without fracturing. But this robusticity came with a metabolic cost. Maintaining such massive skeletal structures required increased calcium intake and elevated bone remodeling rates that placed additional demands on an already stressed physiological system. The limb proportions followed the principles of Allen's rule with mathematical precision. Shortened extremities minimized surface area for heat loss while concentrating body mass near the core. Neanderthal humeri and femora measured significantly shorter than those of contemporary African populations, while the forearms and lower legs showed even more dramatic reduction in length. This body plan created a compact, powerful physique with a low center of gravity that improved stability on ice-covered surfaces and steep terrain. The shortened limbs also reduced the extremities most vulnerable to frostbite: fingers, toes, and distal limb segments that could suffer tissue damage during extreme cold exposure. But the most remarkable aspect of Neanderthal limb anatomy lies in the muscle attachment sites. Every major muscle insertion point shows dramatic enlargement compared to modern humans, indicating hypertrophied musculature that generated tremendous force. The deltoid tuberosity on the humerus, where the powerful shoulder muscle attaches, projects prominently from the bone shaft, creating a rugose surface that speaks of muscles capable of hurling spears with lethal velocity. The linea aspera on the posterior femur, the attachment site for massive thigh muscles, forms a pronounced ridge that indicates leg strength capable of traversing mountainous terrain while carrying heavy loads. The thoracic cage underwent substantial modification to support the increased metabolic demands of cold climate survival. Neanderthal rib cages expanded both laterally and anteroposteriorly, creating a barrel-shaped torso that maximized internal volume. This expansion served multiple functions: increased lung capacity for efficient oxygen exchange in cold, thin air, additional space for enlarged liver and kidneys that process the high-protein diet and metabolic byproducts of cold adaptation, and greater thermal mass that resisted rapid heat loss during extreme weather exposure. Recent biomechanical analysis has revealed that the Neanderthal ribcage configuration would have altered breathing mechanics compared to modern humans. The expanded lower thorax and flared lower ribs created a breathing pattern that emphasized diaphragmatic respiration, more efficient for sustained physical activity and better suited for maintaining core temperature during cold exposure. This was not merely a larger chest. This was a redesigned respiratory system optimized for the specific demands of glacial environments. The pelvic architecture displays distinctive features that reflect both locomotor demands and reproductive constraints. Neanderthal pelves show increased robusticity throughout all elements, with thickened iliac blades and enlarged muscle attachment sites for the powerful gluteal muscles that drove locomotion up steep slopes and across difficult terrain. But the pelvic inlet maintained adequate dimensions for childbirth, despite the overall increase in robusticity, a delicate evolutionary balance between locomotor efficiency and reproductive success. Recent analysis of Neanderthal pelvic morphology has suggested that their birth canal configuration may have required longer gestation periods than modern humans, producing larger, more developed infants capable of surviving harsh postnatal conditions. This hypothesis remains controversial, but if correct, it would indicate fundamental differences in reproductive biology that affected population growth rates and demographic dynamics. Longer gestation would mean fewer births per female lifetime, potentially contributing to the demographic disadvantages that Neanderthals faced when competing with modern human populations. The hand morphology reveals sophisticated adaptations for tool manipulation and environmental interaction that challenge simplistic notions of Neanderthal capabilities. Neanderthal fingers displayed increased robusticity with enlarged muscle attachments for the flexor and extensor muscles that controlled grip strength and fine motor control. But the most remarkable feature lies in the thumb, a robust first metacarpal and enlarged thenar muscles that generated powerful precision grips essential for stone tool production and use. Biomechanical analysis has demonstrated that Neanderthal hands were capable of generating grip forces exceeding modern human capabilities while maintaining the fine motor control necessary for delicate tasks. The fingertips expanded to support enlarged tactile pads that enhanced sensory feedback during tool manipulation, crucial for working in cold conditions when tactile sensitivity was naturally reduced. These were not crude, clumsy hands. These were precision instruments capable of manufacturing tools that required millimeter-level accuracy and hours of concentrated effort. The vertebral column adapted to support the increased body mass and muscle development characteristic of Neanderthal populations. Individual vertebrae enlarged throughout the spinal column, with expanded vertebral bodies and robust neural arches that resisted compression forces. The cervical vertebrae showed particular enlargement to support the heavy skull and powerful neck musculature, while the lumbar region developed enhanced lordotic curvature that maintained balance despite the forward projection of the facial region and enlarged chest. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Neanderthal anatomy lies in the integrated nature of these adaptations. This was not a collection of random features. This was a coordinated system where every element supported and enhanced the others. The powerful musculature required robust skeletal support. The enlarged muscles demanded increased metabolic capacity. The elevated metabolism necessitated efficient respiratory and circulatory systems. The entire system required sophisticated neural control. The result was a hominin species uniquely suited to survival in the most challenging environments on Earth. The metabolic adaptations that complemented these structural modifications created an integrated system optimized for cold climate survival. Neanderthal basal metabolic rate exceeded that of modern humans by an estimated 15 to 20%, generating additional heat production essential for maintaining core body temperature in sub-freezing conditions. This elevated metabolism required increased caloric intake. Estimates suggest Neanderthal males required 4,000 to 5,000 calories daily, with females needing 3,000 to 4,000 calories. These enormous energy demands drove the development of efficient hunting strategies and dietary diversification that characterized Neanderthal subsistence patterns. The circulatory system underwent modifications to support enhanced heat distribution and prevent cold-related tissue damage. Archaeological evidence suggests enlarged heart capacity to pump increased blood volumes, while peripheral circulation adapted to maintain blood flow to extremities during cold exposure. The nasal passages contained extensive vascular networks that rapidly warmed incoming air, while enlarged facial blood vessels provided efficient heat exchange systems that prevented facial frostbite during extreme weather exposure. Neanderthal skin likely displayed adaptations for cold climate survival, though direct evidence remains limited due to preservation constraints. Comparative analysis with modern cold-adapted populations suggests increased subcutaneous fat deposits for insulation, enhanced sebaceous gland activity for skin protection, and possibly increased melanin production in sun-exposed areas to prevent UV damage reflected from snow and ice surfaces. Hair distribution probably emphasized insulation, with dense body hair providing additional thermal protection during extreme weather events. The territorial expanse controlled by Neanderthal populations represented one of the most extensive ranges occupied by any hominin species outside Africa. A vast domain stretching approximately 4,000 kilometers from the Atlantic coastlines to the Altai Mountains of southern Siberia, and spanning latitudes from the Mediterranean basin to the subarctic regions of northern Europe. This remarkable distribution demonstrated extraordinary adaptive flexibility and sophisticated migration strategies that enabled Neanderthals to exploit ecological niches unavailable to their contemporaries. The western boundaries of Neanderthal territory reached the Atlantic shores of Portugal and Spain, where archaeological sites such as Gruta de Oliveira and El Cidrón provide evidence of sustained occupation dating back over 100,000 years. These coastal populations developed specialized subsistence strategies that incorporated marine resources alongside traditional terrestrial hunting and gathering activities. Shell middens containing thousands of limpet, mussel, and other mollusk shells document systematic exploitation of intertidal zones, while marine mammal remains indicate occasional hunting of seals and dolphins that ventured close to shore. The lithic assemblages from these coastal sites show technological adaptations for processing seafood and manufacturing fishing implements. Specialized scrapers with distinctive edge angles appear designed for opening shellfish, while pointed implements may have served as fish spears or processing tools. The presence of these specialized tools indicates that marine resource exploitation was not opportunistic scavenging, but systematic harvesting that required dedicated technology and accumulated knowledge about tidal patterns, seasonal availability, and optimal collection techniques. Moving eastward from the Iberian Peninsula, Neanderthal populations established dense concentrations throughout France, where over 200 archaeological sites document continuous occupation spanning from approximately 250,000 to 30,000 years ago. The French landscape provided ideal conditions for Neanderthal settlement, limestone cave systems offering natural shelter, abundant flint deposits for tool production, and diverse ecological zones supporting varied subsistence strategies. The Dordogne region alone contains dozens of major Neanderthal sites, each revealing distinct phases of occupation that track population movements and technological developments across millennia. La Ferracie, one of the most extensively studied French Neanderthal sites, has yielded 8 Neanderthal burials spanning multiple generations, providing unprecedented insights into mortuary practices and social organization. The careful positioning of bodies, the association with stone tools and animal bones, and the evidence for intentional grave construction demonstrate complex symbolic behaviors that required abstract thinking and social coordination. These were not simple disposal of corpses. These were ceremonial acts that reflected beliefs about death, social relationships, and possibly spiritual concepts that connected the living and the dead. The British Isles represented the northwestern frontier of Neanderthal expansion, with populations crossing the land bridge that periodically connected Britain to continental Europe during glacial periods when sea levels dropped by over 100 meters. Pont Newydd Cave in Wales and Swanscombe in Kent document Neanderthal presence dating to approximately 230,000 years ago, though occupation appears to have been intermittent and closely tied to climatic fluctuations. During glacial maxima, rising sea levels and advancing ice sheets forced abandonment of British territories, while interglacial warming periods enabled recolonization from continental populations. The archaeological evidence from British sites reveals populations at the extreme edge of viable Neanderthal habitat, where survival depended on sophisticated adaptation to rapidly changing conditions. The stone tool assemblages show high frequencies of scrapers and processing tools, suggesting intensive hide working for cold weather clothing production. The faunal remains indicate hunting of cold-adapted species including reindeer, woolly rhinoceros, and mammoth. Animals that provided not just meat but also materials for shelter construction and tool production. Central European territories formed the demographic heartland of Neanderthal populations, with extensive archaeological evidence from Germany, Austria, Czech Republic, and surrounding regions documenting intensive occupation and technological innovation. The Neander Valley itself, where the first recognized Neanderthal remains were discovered in 1856, represents just one of hundreds of sites scattered across the region's river valleys and limestone formations. German sites such as Ehringsdorf, Salzgitter Lebenstedt, and Königsau reveal sophisticated hunting strategies targeting large herbivores, including woolly rhinoceros, bison, and red deer. While extensive lithic assemblages demonstrate advanced stone tool technologies, the Königsau site provides particularly compelling evidence for Neanderthal cognitive capabilities through the discovery of birch bark tar, a sophisticated adhesive requiring controlled heating of birch bark in oxygen-limited conditions to produce a sticky, waterproof substance suitable for hafting stone tools to wooden handles. The production process demands understanding of complex chemical transformations, precise temperature control, and multi-step manufacturing sequences that indicate advanced planning abilities and technical knowledge. This was not simple technology, this was chemistry. The eastward expansion of Neanderthal populations into the vast territories of Eastern Europe and Western Asia occurred through multiple migration waves that established genetically distinct regional populations. Archaeological sites in Poland such as Stajnia and Pietrasyn document Neanderthal presence extending to approximately 50,000 years ago, while Ukrainian sites including Moldova and Kikoba provide evidence of specialized mammoth hunting strategies adapted to the open steppe environments. These eastern populations developed distinctive tool technologies and settlement patterns that reflected adaptation to the challenging conditions of continental interiors. Moldova I in Ukraine stands as one of the most remarkable Neanderthal sites ever discovered, a location where populations constructed elaborate shelters using mammoth bones as structural elements. The remains of these dwellings include circular arrangements of mammoth skulls, long bones, and tusks that formed frameworks measuring 4 to 6 meters in diameter. Hide coverings secured over these bone frameworks created windproof, insulated shelters capable of retaining heat generated by central hearths. The construction of these structures required coordinated group efforts to transport and position mammoth bones weighing hundreds of kilograms each, a feat that demonstrates sophisticated engineering knowledge and social organization. The Caucasus Mountains served as a crucial corridor for Neanderthal expansion into Western Asia, with sites such as Mezmyskaya Cave in Russia and Ordval Kalda in Georgia, documenting sustained occupation from approximately 200,000 to 40,000 years ago. The mountainous terrain provided abundant cave shelters in diverse ecological zones ranging from temperate forests to alpine meadows, supporting varied subsistence strategies and enabling population persistence through climatic fluctuations. Genetic analysis of Caucasian Neanderthal remains reveals distinct lineages that maintained connections with both European and Asian populations while developing regional characteristics. The southern limits of Neanderthal distribution extended throughout the Mediterranean basin, encompassing the Italian peninsula, the Balkans, and parts of Greece and Turkey. Italian sites such as Grotta Guattari, Sacco Pastore, and Grotta di Fumani document continuous Neanderthal occupation spanning over 150,000 years, with populations exploiting the relatively stable Mediterranean climate and diverse resource base. The Italian populations developed sophisticated hunting strategies targeting both large game and smaller animals, while coastal sites reveal systematic exploitation of marine resources including shellfish and marine mammals. Balkan populations occupied strategic territories that served as refugia during harsh glacial periods, maintaining genetic diversity and cultural traditions that enabled rapid expansion during interglacial warming phases. Sites such as Krapina in Croatia Vindija Cave and Sandalja reveal complex occupation sequences with evidence of advanced tool technologies, symbolic behavior, and sophisticated settlement strategies. The region's diverse topography provided access to varied ecological zones within relatively small geographic areas, reducing the risks associated with resource scarcity and environmental fluctuations. The easternmost extent of confirmed Neanderthal presence reached the Altai Mountains of southern Siberia, where Denisova Cave and Okladnikov Cave have yielded Neanderthal remains and artifacts dating to approximately 50,000 to 60,000 years ago. These populations represented the culmination of eastward expansion across the Eurasian landmass, establishing communities over 4,000 kilometers from the Western European core populations. The Altai Neanderthals developed unique technological adaptations for survival in extreme continental climates, with specialized toolkits for processing animal hides and manufacturing cold-weather clothing. The Levantine corridor connecting Africa and Eurasia witnessed complex population dynamics involving multiple hominin species including Neanderthals, early modern humans, and possibly other archaic populations. Sites such as Taban Cave, Kabara Cave, and Amud Cave document alternating occupations by different hominin populations over spans of 50,000 years or more. The Levantine Neanderthals maintained genetic connections with European populations while developing regional adaptations to semi-arid environments and different prey species. The technological achievements of Neanderthal populations represented a sophisticated understanding of raw material properties, manufacturing techniques, and functional design that enabled survival in the demanding environments of Pleistocene Eurasia. Their tool-making traditions, collectively known as the Mosterian industry, demonstrated remarkable consistency across vast geographic ranges, while simultaneously exhibiting regional variations that reflected local adaptations and cultural preferences. These stone tool assemblages, spanning approximately 300,000 to 30,000 years ago, reveal a level of technological complexity that required advanced cognitive abilities, detailed planning, and precise motor control. The foundation of Neanderthal stone tool technology rested upon the mastery of prepared core techniques, particularly the Levallois method, which represented a revolutionary advancement in lithic production. This technique involved the careful preparation of stone cores through a series of predetermined flake removals that shaped the core surface geometry before striking off the desired tool blank. The process required sophisticated three-dimensional visualization, as the napper had to envision the final tool form while executing a complex sequence of preparatory strikes. The Levallois technique enabled Neanderthals to produce standardized tool blanks with predictable shapes and sharp cutting edges, maximizing the utility obtained from each piece of raw material. In environments where high-quality stone sources were scarce or distant, this efficiency could mean the difference between success and failure. A single prepared core could yield multiple usable flakes, each requiring minimal additional modification to create functional implements. This was not wasteful, opportunistic tool production. This was careful resource management that reflected understanding of material constraints and planning for future needs. The execution of Levallois reduction began with the selection of appropriate raw materials, typically high-quality flint, chert, or quartzite nodules with fine-grained homogeneous structures. Neanderthal nappers demonstrated intimate knowledge of stone properties, selecting materials based on fracture predictability, edge retention, and availability within their territorial ranges. The initial core preparation involved establishing a striking platform through careful removal of the cortex and creation of a flat surface perpendicular to the intended flaking direction. Subsequent flake removals shaped the core's convex upper surface, creating the precise angles necessary for successful tool blank detachment. This preparatory phase required dozens of carefully controlled strikes, each removing small flakes that gradually transformed the raw nodule into a prepared core with the correct geometry. The napper had to maintain consistent angles, control force application, and adjust technique based on the specific properties of the stone being worked. This was not mindless hammering. This was precision engineering executed with Stone Age tools. The striking of the final Levallois flake required exceptional skill and timing, as the napper had to deliver a precisely controlled blow that would travel across the prepared surface and detach a flake with predetermined dimensions. Successful execution produced elongated flakes with sharp lateral edges, minimal dorsal ridges, and platforms suitable for hafting or handheld use. These blanks served as the foundation for further tool modification, with Neanderthals employing secondary retouch techniques to create specialized implements tailored to specific functional requirements. Regional variations within Mousterian assemblages reflected both environmental adaptations and cultural traditions that developed across different Neanderthal populations. The Quina Mousterian, identified primarily in southwestern France, emphasized the production of thick, heavily retouched scrapers with steeply angled working edges. These tools exhibited intensive use wear patterns indicating prolonged use for hide processing, woodworking, and plant material preparation. The manufacturing technique involved extensive secondary retouch that created robust implements capable of withstanding repeated use and resharpening cycles. Quina assemblages typically contained high frequencies of side scrapers, transverse scrapers, and denticulated pieces, suggesting specialized activities related to resource processing and material preparation. The thick, robust nature of these tools indicates they were designed for heavy-duty tasks that would quickly dull or damage lighter implements. Archaeological experiments have demonstrated that Quina-type scrapers excel at processing thick animal hides and working hard woods, tasks that would have been essential for survival in cold climates, where clothing and shelter construction were matters of life and death. The Pharisee-Mousterian tradition, also concentrated in southwestern France but extending into northern Spain, displayed different technological priorities, emphasizing the production of elongated tools with minimal retouch. These assemblages contained higher frequencies of naturally backed knives, points, and convergent scrapers produced through careful core preparation and precise flake removal. The Pharisee tradition demonstrated greater emphasis on tool standardization and blade-like proportions, possibly reflecting different functional requirements or cultural preferences within regional Neanderthal populations. Typical Mousterian assemblages, found throughout the broader geographic range of Neanderthal populations, represented a more generalized tool-making tradition that combined elements from various regional styles. These assemblages contained balanced proportions of scrapers, points, and denticulated pieces, with moderate levels of secondary retouch and diverse core reduction strategies. The technological flexibility evident in typical Mousterian sites suggests adaptive responses to varied environmental conditions and resource availability across different territories. The production of composite tools represented one of the most sophisticated aspects of Neanderthal technology, requiring coordination of multiple raw materials and complex manufacturing processes. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Königsau in Germany and Campitello in Italy demonstrates the systematic use of organic hafting materials, including wood, bone, and processed animal sinew. The creation of hafted implements involved careful selection of handle materials, precise shaping of both stone and organic components, and secure binding techniques that could withstand the stresses of repeated use. Wooden spear production showcased Neanderthal expertise in organic tool manufacturing and understanding of material properties. The famous Schöningen spears, dating to approximately 400,000 years ago, revealed sophisticated woodworking techniques, including careful species selection, seasoning processes, and precise shaping methods. These implements, crafted from spruce wood, measured up to 2.3 meters in length and featured carefully balanced proportions with thickened grip areas and tapered points. The manufacturing process required detailed knowledge of wood grain orientation, moisture content, and seasoning techniques to produce durable functional weapons. The selection of wood species for different applications demonstrated Neanderthal understanding of material properties and functional requirements. Hardwoods such as oak and ash provided durability for handles and structural components, while softer woods like spruce and pine offered workability for detailed shaping and point formation. Archaeological evidence indicates that Neanderthals practiced controlled burning techniques to harden wooden points, creating fire-hardened tips that penetrated animal hides more effectively while maintaining structural integrity during impact. Bone tool production represented another dimension of Neanderthal technological sophistication, with implements ranging from simple expedient tools to carefully manufactured specialized instruments. Retouchers made from long bone fragments enabled precise secondary modification of stone tools, while bone points served as projectile tips and piercing implements. The production process involved careful selection of appropriate bones, systematic breakage to obtain suitable blanks, and controlled abrasion against stone surfaces to achieve desired shapes and functional characteristics. Hide processing represented a critical technological domain that required specialized tools and techniques for converting animal skins into useful materials for clothing, shelter, and storage containers. Neanderthal scraper assemblages included numerous implements specifically designed for hide preparation, with distinctive edge angles and wear patterns indicating systematic processing activities. The scraping process involved removing flesh and fat deposits from fresh hides, followed by careful thinning and softening procedures that transformed raw skins into workable leather. The hafting of stone tools required sophisticated binding techniques and careful attention to component integration. Archaeological evidence suggests multiple hafting methods, including direct insertion into wooden handles, binding with processed sinew or plant fibers, and securing with natural adhesives such as birch bark tar. The production of birch bark tar, documented at several Neanderthal sites, required controlled heating of birch bark in oxygen-limited conditions to produce a sticky, waterproof adhesive suitable for tool hafting and equipment repair. Raw material procurement strategies revealed extensive territorial knowledge and sophisticated planning capabilities. Neanderthals regularly transported high-quality stone materials over distances exceeding 100 kilometers, indicating detailed understanding of lithic source locations and quality variations. Some assemblages contained exotic materials that originated from sources 200 to 300 kilometers from the archaeological sites, suggesting either extensive mobility patterns or exchange networks between different population groups. The survival of Neanderthal populations across the harsh landscapes of Pleistocene Eurasia depended fundamentally upon their mastery of sophisticated hunting techniques and comprehensive resource exploitation strategies. Archaeological evidence reveals that these populations developed specialized approaches to procuring and processing large game animals that formed the cornerstone of their subsistence economy. The skeletal remains found at numerous Neanderthal sites demonstrate systematic targeting of megafauna, including woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceros, straight-tusked elephants, cave bears, bison, aurochs, red deer, and reindeer. Mammoth hunting represented perhaps the most challenging and rewarding aspect of Neanderthal subsistence activities. These colossal herbivores, weighing up to 6 tons and standing 4 meters tall at the shoulder, possessed formidable defensive capabilities, including massive curved tusks and thick protective hide. Archaeological sites such as Molodova in Ukraine and La Côte de Saint-Brelade in Jersey contain extensive mammoth bone accumulations that reveal systematic hunting and processing activities spanning thousands of years. The bone assemblages display distinctive butchery marks indicating precise knowledge of mammoth anatomy and efficient carcass processing techniques that maximize meat extraction while minimizing energy expenditure. Cut marks appear at optimal locations for disarticulating joints, removing muscle masses, and accessing internal organs. The systematic nature of these processing patterns indicates accumulated knowledge passed down through generations, a cultural tradition of mammoth butchery that represented centuries of accumulated expertise. The procurement of woolly rhinoceros required equally sophisticated hunting strategies adapted to these aggressive, heavily armored animals. Weighing up to 3 tons and equipped with formidable horns and thick skin, woolly rhinoceros presented significant challenges that demanded coordinated group efforts and specialized weapons. Sites such as Taubach in Germany and Salzgitter-Lebenstedt contain rhinoceros remain showing evidence of systematic hunting and processing, with cut marks indicating careful removal of meat, hide, and other useful materials. Bison hunting formed a crucial component of Neanderthal subsistence strategies, particularly in the open grassland environments of Central and Eastern Europe. These powerful bovids, standing up to 2 meters tall and weighing over 800 kilograms, traveled in herds that provided opportunities for mass procurement events when successfully intercepted. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Moran in France reveals systematic bison hunting, with bone accumulations representing hundreds of individuals processed over extended periods. The butchery patterns indicate efficient processing techniques that extracted maximum nutritional value from each carcass, while producing useful byproducts including hides, bone tools, and marrow. The concentration of certain skeletal elements at processing sites suggests systematic transport decisions. High-utility portions were carried back to residential bases, while low-utility elements were abandoned at kill sites. This selective transport indicates sophisticated understanding of nutritional returns and energy costs associated with different carcass components. Reindeer represented a particularly important prey species in northern European environments, where these animals formed the primary protein source for many Neanderthal populations. The seasonal migration patterns of reindeer herds provided predictable opportunities for mass hunting events that could supply communities with substantial food reserves. Sites such as Salzgitter-Lebenstedt and Wallertheim in Germany contain extensive reindeer bone assemblages, indicating systematic exploitation of migrating herds. The processing evidence reveals comprehensive utilization of reindeer carcasses, with every usable component extracted for food, tools, clothing, or shelter materials. Antlers were fashioned into tools and weapons, hides were processed into clothing and shelter coverings, bones were broken for marrow extraction and tool production. Even hooves and sinew were collected for specialized applications. This complete utilization reflects both the high energy investment required to procure prey animals and the variable availability of resources in challenging Pleistocene environments. The coordination required for successful large game hunting necessitated sophisticated group organization and communication systems. Archaeological evidence suggests hunting parties consisting of 8 to 15 individuals working together to track, surround, and kill large prey animals. The spatial distribution of stone tools and bone fragments at kill sites indicates coordinated activities, with different group members performing specialized roles including tracking, driving prey toward ambush locations, delivering killing blows, and systematic carcass processing. Seasonal hunting patterns reflected Neanderthal understanding of prey, animal behavior, and migration cycles. Archaeological assemblages from different time periods within the same sites reveal systematic variations in prey species composition that tracks seasonal availability. Spring assemblages typically contain higher frequencies of young animals and species that gave birth during warmer months, while autumn assemblages show increased representation of animals in peak condition before winter. These patterns indicate sophisticated scheduling of hunting activities to maximize nutritional returns and take advantage of predictable behavioral patterns in prey populations. The development of specialized hunting weapons required detailed understanding of animal anatomy and ballistics. Wooden spears with fire-hardened points provided the primary hunting implements, with different point morphologies designed for specific prey species and hunting situations. Thrusting spears with robust points served for close-quarters combat with large, dangerous animals, while lighter throwing spears enabled attacks from safer distances. Archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthal hunters carried multiple spear types during hunting expeditions, selecting appropriate weapons based on encountered prey species in tactical situations. Ambush hunting strategies exploited natural landscape features to increase hunting success, while minimizing risk to human participants. Cliff drives represented one of the most effective techniques, with hunters driving prey animals toward steep precipices where they fell to their deaths or suffered injuries that facilitated killing. Sites such as La Côte de Saint-Prelade contain massive bone accumulations at the base of cliffs, indicating repeated use of these locations for driving mammoth and rhinoceros herds over the edge. The success of these operations required intimate knowledge of animal behavior, terrain features, and weather conditions that influenced prey movement patterns. Hunters had to position themselves correctly to initiate the drive, maintain coordination during the chase, and ensure that panicked animals moved toward rather than away from the cliff edge. The complexity of these operations demonstrates sophisticated planning abilities and group coordination that required effective communication and shared understanding of tactical objectives. Water-based hunting strategies took advantage of river crossings and wetland environments where large animals became vulnerable to human predation. Archaeological sites located near ancient water sources contain evidence of systematic hunting activities targeting animals during drinking or crossing activities. The processing areas adjacent to these water sources reveal efficient butchery operations that took advantage of water availability for cleaning carcasses and processing hides. Despite their specialization in large game hunting, Neanderthal populations demonstrated remarkable dietary flexibility through systematic exploitation of plant resources. Recent analysis of dental calculus from Neanderthal teeth has revolutionized understanding of their plant consumption patterns, revealing evidence of nuts, berries, tubers, and medicinal plants that supplemented their primarily carnivorous diet. The microscopic plant remains preserved in dental calculus include fragments of cooked starchy foods, indicating sophisticated plant processing techniques that increased nutritional availability and digestibility. Nut processing represented a particularly important aspect of plant food exploitation, with archaeological evidence revealing systematic collection and processing of hazelnuts, walnuts, and pine nuts. Sites such as Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar contain extensive shell fragments and processing tools, indicating intensive nut exploitation during autumn months, when these resources reached peak availability. The processing techniques involve systematic cracking using stone anvils and hammers, followed by extraction of nutritious nut meats that provided essential fatty acids and calories during resource-scarce periods. Berry collection provided crucial vitamins and carbohydrates that balanced the protein-heavy diet derived from large game hunting. Dental calculus analysis has identified remains of various berry species, including blackberries, elderberries, and rosehips, that were systematically collected during summer and autumn months. The processing of these fruits likely involved both immediate consumption and preservation techniques, such as drying or mixing with animal fats to create concentrated food stores for winter consumption. Tuber exploitation required sophisticated knowledge of plant identification and seasonal availability patterns. Archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthals systematically collected various root vegetables, including wild carrots, onions, and other starchy tubers that provided essential carbohydrates. The processing of these plant foods involved careful preparation techniques, including cooking, grinding, and fermentation that increased nutritional availability while reducing toxic compounds present in some wild plant species. The use of medicinal plants represents one of the most intriguing aspects of Neanderthal plant exploitation, suggesting sophisticated understanding of plant properties and therapeutic applications. Dental calculus from Neanderthal remains at sites such as El Sidrón in Spain contains evidence of plants with known medicinal properties, including yarrow and chamomile. These plants have bitter tastes and limited nutritional value, suggesting their consumption was motivated by therapeutic rather than dietary considerations. The archaeological evidence from Neanderthal settlements across Europe and Western Asia reveals consistent patterns of small group organization that form the fundamental building blocks of their society. Site occupation data from caves and rock shelters throughout their territorial range indicates residential groups typically numbering between 10 and 30 individuals, with most sites showing evidence of sustained habitation by groups clustering around 15 to 20 people. These population estimates derive from spatial analysis of living floors, hearth distributions, and artifact densities that reflect the daily activities and sleeping arrangements of prehistoric communities. The cave site of Grotte du Renne in France exemplifies typical Neanderthal group size patterns, with excavations revealing distinct activity areas that correspond to family units of 4 to 6 individuals clustered around individual hearths. The spatial organization of stone tools, food processing debris, and sleeping areas suggests nuclear family structures nested within larger residential groups. Similar patterns emerge from sites across the Neanderthal range, where the archaeological evidence consistently points towards small cohesive social units that maintain stable membership over extended periods. The demographic composition of these groups likely included multiple generations, with evidence suggesting extended family structures that incorporated grandparents, parents, and children within single residential units. Age-at-death profiles reconstructed from Neanderthal skeletal remains indicate significant numbers of individuals surviving beyond reproductive age, suggesting that elderly group members played important roles in community survival through their accumulated knowledge and experience. The presence of these older individuals within archaeological contexts demonstrates that Neanderthal groups invested resources in caring for non-productive members, indicating complex social bonds that extended beyond immediate survival needs. This investment makes evolutionary sense. Elderly individuals possess decades of accumulated knowledge about resource locations, seasonal patterns, tool-making techniques, and survival strategies that could be transmitted to younger generations. They were living libraries of cultural information whose value transcended their physical capabilities. Skeletal evidence from numerous Neanderthal sites provides compelling documentation of systematic care for disabled and injured community members, revealing sophisticated social support systems that maintained group cohesion through cooperative assistance. The famous Shanidar, one individual from Iraq, survived for years with a withered right arm, blindness in one eye, and extensive cranial injuries that would have prevented independent survival in harsh Pleistocene environments. The healing patterns visible on his bones indicate prolonged care and protection by other group members who provided food, shelter, and protection for an individual incapable of contributing to hunting or resource procurement activities. This was not occasional charity. This was sustained, long-term care that required significant resource investment from the community. The fact that this individual survived to an advanced age despite his disabilities speaks volumes about Neanderthal social values and group cohesion. The La Chapelle aux Saints Neanderthal from France presents another striking example of community care for disabled individuals. This elderly male suffered from severe arthritis in his spine and limbs, dental abscesses, and other debilitating conditions, that would have severely limited his mobility and ability to participate in normal subsistence activities. Despite these limitations, he survived to an advanced age for Neanderthal populations, indicating sustained support from community members who shared resources and provided protection for a non-productive individual. The investment of group resources in maintaining disabled members suggests emotional bonds and social obligations that transcended immediate survival calculations. These were not cold, calculating decisions based on cost-benefit analysis. These were expressions of compassion, loyalty, and social solidarity that bound communities together through mutual support and shared responsibility. The archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthals possessed the emotional capacity for empathy and the social structures to translate that empathy into sustained caregiving behaviors. Evidence from the Atapuerca sites in Spain reveals additional cases of community care, including individuals with developmental abnormalities and traumatic injuries that healed over extended periods. The survival of these individuals required coordinated group efforts to provide food, shelter, and protection during vulnerable recovery periods. The frequency of healed injuries in Neanderthal skeletal assemblages indicates that such care was not exceptional, but rather represented standard social behavior that strengthened group bonds and maintained community cohesion through mutual support systems. The territorial behavior of Neanderthal groups emerges through analysis of raw material transport patterns and site distribution across the European landscape. Lithic sourcing studies reveal that individual groups maintain territories encompassing diverse ecological zones within ranges typically extending 50 to 100 kilometers from residential bases. The systematic transport of high-quality stone materials from specific quarry locations to processing sites demonstrates detailed knowledge of resource distributions and established patterns of territorial exploitation that minimized conflicts between neighboring groups. Archaeological evidence from the Périgord region of France illustrates typical territorial organization, with distinct clusters of sites separated by buffer zones containing minimal archaeological evidence. Each cluster contains a hierarchy of site types, including large residential caves, smaller temporary camps, and specialized activity locations such as hunting blinds and raw material procurement sites. The spatial arrangement of these site clusters suggests territorial boundaries that provided each group with access to varied resources, while maintaining separation from neighboring populations. The distribution of distinctive stone tool styles across geographic regions provides additional evidence for territorial boundaries and cultural group identity. The Quenimosterian tradition, concentrated in southwestern France, shows clear geographic boundaries that correspond to major river valleys and mountain ranges. These technological boundaries likely reflect territorial limits maintained by different Neanderthal groups, with distinct cultural traditions serving as markers of group identity and territorial claims. The consistency of these patterns across multiple time periods suggests stable territorial systems that persisted for thousands of years. This territorial stability indicates successful resource management strategies that balance population needs with environmental carrying capacity, preventing overexploitation that could have led to resource depletion and territorial conflicts. Sharing patterns within Neanderthal territories reveal sophisticated systems of reciprocal exchange that distributed risk and ensured group survival during periods of local resource scarcity. Archaeological evidence indicates systematic sharing of large game carcasses between multiple family units, with butchery patterns showing division of meat portions according to established social protocols. The transport of processed meat and tools between different sites within territorial ranges demonstrates coordinated resource management that maximized the utility of successful hunting episodes. The seasonal aggregation of multiple groups at favored locations created opportunities for resource sharing on a larger scale, with archaeological evidence suggesting periodic gatherings that brought together several residential groups for cooperative activities. Sites such as Moron in France contain evidence of massive bison processing events that exceeded the consumption capacity of single groups, indicating coordinated hunting efforts involving multiple communities. These aggregation events likely served multiple functions, including mate exchange, information sharing, and cooperative resource procurement that strengthened social networks across broader regional populations. The genetic evidence for gene flow across vast distances supports this interpretation, indicating that Neanderthal populations maintained social connections that transcended individual group boundaries and facilitated genetic exchange across regional networks. The archaeological record reveals compelling evidence that Neanderthal populations engaged in complex symbolic behaviors that required sophisticated cognitive abilities far exceeding basic survival needs. These activities, documented across numerous sites throughout Europe and Western Asia, demonstrate abstract thinking, planning capabilities, and social awareness that fundamentally challenge earlier assumptions about Neanderthal intellectual capacity. The systematic nature of these behaviors, their geographic distribution, and their persistence across thousands of years indicate that symbolic expression formed an integral component of Neanderthal culture rather than representing isolated instances of advanced behavior. The burial practices documented at La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France provide some of the most convincing evidence for intentional interment of the deceased by Neanderthal populations. The skeletal remains of an elderly male discovered in 1908 were found in a shallow depression that had been deliberately excavated within the cave floor. The body had been positioned in a flexed posture with the knees drawn toward the chest, an arrangement that required careful placement and could not have resulted from natural depositional processes. The surrounding sediments showed clear evidence of intentional backfilling, with loose soil and small stones packed around the remains to create a protective covering. This was not casual disposal of a corpse. This was deliberate burial that required significant time and energy investment. The group had to excavate the grave, position the body carefully, and then refill the depression, activities that served no immediate survival function but reflected complex beliefs about death and social relationships. The stratigraphic context of the La Chapelle burial revealed additional details that support intentional interment. The grave cut extended approximately 30 centimeters below the contemporary living surface, requiring deliberate excavation using stone tools or wooden implements. The edges of the depression showed clear boundaries that distinguished the burial feature from surrounding undisturbed sediments. Stone tools and animal bone fragments found within the grave fill suggested that these artifacts had been intentionally placed with the deceased, though their precise symbolic meaning remains subject to interpretation. The preservation conditions at La Chapelle enabled detailed analysis of the burial context, revealing evidence for rapid covering of the remains that protected them from scavenging and natural disturbance. The articulated condition of the skeleton indicated that decomposition had occurred within the grave, rather than through exposure on the surface followed by secondary burial. Taphonomic analysis confirmed that the bones showed minimal evidence of carnivore gnawing or weathering, supporting the interpretation of immediate burial following death. The Shanidar cave site in Iraq has yielded even more extensive evidence for Neanderthal burial practices, with multiple individuals interred within the cave deposits over thousands of years. Shanidar 4, discovered in association with concentrations of flower pollen, initially suggested the possibility of ritual flower placement during burial ceremonies, while subsequent analysis has questioned whether the pollen association resulted from intentional human behavior or natural processes. The overall burial context remains compelling evidence for deliberate interment practices. The positioning of Shanidar burials revealed consistent patterns that suggest established cultural protocols for treatment of the deceased. Multiple individuals were placed in flexed positions with specific orientations relative to cave walls and geological features. The clustering of burials in particular areas of the cave indicated designated burial zones that were maintained over extended periods, suggesting cultural continuity and mortuary practices across multiple generations. The Shanidar 1 individual, despite his severe disabilities and advanced age, received burial treatment identical to other community members, indicating that mortuary practices extended to all group members regardless of their physical condition or social productivity. The careful placement of his remains and the protective covering of sediments demonstrated that disabled individuals maintained full social status within Neanderthal communities even after death. Additional burial sites throughout Europe and Western Asia have confirmed the widespread nature of Neanderthal mortuary practices. The Didiriye cave site in Syria yielded the remains of 2 Neanderthal children who had been deliberately buried in close proximity to each other. The careful positioning of these young individuals and the association with stone tools suggested that burial practices extended to all age groups within Neanderthal society. The investment of time and energy in proper burial of children who had not yet contributed significantly to group survival indicates emotional bonds and social obligations that transcended practical considerations. These were not utilitarian decisions. These were expressions of grief, love, and social connection that reflected the emotional depth of Neanderthal communities. The systematic use of mineral pigments represents another crucial dimension of Neanderthal symbolic behavior, with archaeological evidence documenting the collection, processing, and application of colorants across numerous sites throughout their territorial range. Ochre, a naturally occurring iron oxide that produces red and yellow pigments, appears consistently in Neanderthal archaeological assemblages from Spain to Central Asia. The ubiquity of ochre finds and the evidence for systematic processing indicate that pigment use represented a standardized cultural practice rather than isolated experimentation. The procurement of ochre required deliberate effort and planning, as high-quality deposits were not universally available across Neanderthal territories. Archaeological evidence indicates transport of ochre materials over distances exceeding 25 kilometers from known geological sources, demonstrating that Neanderthal groups specifically sought out these materials for cultural purposes. The selection criteria for ochre procurement showed preferences for specific color qualities and textures that produced optimal pigments for intended applications. Processing techniques for ochre preparation involved grinding and abrading raw materials against stone surfaces to produce fine powders suitable for application. Archaeological sites contain numerous grinding stones, with distinctive red staining that resulted from repeated ochre processing activities. The wear patterns on these implements indicate systematic production methods that created consistent pigment qualities across multiple processing episodes. Manganese dioxide, which produces black pigments, appears less frequently in Neanderthal sites but shows similar patterns of deliberate procurement and processing. The combination of red ochre and black manganese provided a basic palette that enabled creation of varied color effects for different symbolic purposes. The transport distances for manganese materials often exceeded those for ochre, indicating even greater investment in obtaining specific colorant materials. The application of processed pigments remains more difficult to document directly due to preservation limitations, but several lines of evidence suggest systematic use for body decoration and symbolic marking. Microscopic analysis of ochre residues from some sites reveals wear patterns consistent with application to soft materials, such as skin or hide. The particle size distributions of processed ochre suggest preparation methods optimized for body painting, rather than other potential applications, such as hide processing or tool maintenance. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that ochre preparation techniques documented at Neanderthal sites produce pigments suitable for body decoration that remain visible for extended periods when properly applied. The color intensity and adherence properties of these pigments would have enabled creation of distinctive markings for individual identification, group membership, or ceremonial purposes. The persistence of ochre staining on archaeological materials suggests that pigment applications were sufficiently durable to serve practical symbolic functions. The final populations of Neanderthals persisted in scattered refugia across southwestern Europe until approximately 40,000 years ago, marking the end of a lineage that had successfully adapted to European environments for over 400,000 years. These last surviving groups concentrated primarily in the Iberian Peninsula, southern France, and isolated pockets throughout the Italian Peninsula and Balkans, where geographic barriers and favorable microclimates provided temporary respite from the mounting pressures that had eliminated their populations across most of Europe. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar, Zafaria Cave in southern Spain, and Grotta di Fumane in northern Italy documents the persistence of traditional Mousterian technologies and subsistence strategies, even as modern human populations dominated surrounding territories. The Iberian Peninsula served as the primary refugium for late surviving Neanderthal populations, with over 30 sites yielding evidence of occupation dating to the final millennia of their existence. The mountainous terrain of the Pyrenees, Cantabrian Mountains, and Baetic Cordillera created isolated valleys and cave systems that provided natural fortresses against the advancing modern human populations. These geographic barriers limited access routes and created bottlenecks that may have slowed the expansion of competing populations, while providing Neanderthal groups with defendable territories rich in diverse resources. Gorham's Cave, situated on the southeastern face of the Rock of Gibraltar, represents one of the most extensively studied late Neanderthal sites and provides crucial insights into the final phases of their existence. The cave's strategic location overlooking the Mediterranean provided access to both terrestrial and marine resources, while its elevated position offered protection from sea level fluctuations and potential threats. Excavations have revealed occupation layers spanning from approximately 55,000 to 28,000 years ago, with the uppermost Neanderthal deposits representing some of the latest confirmed evidence for their survival. The artifact assemblages from Gorham's Cave demonstrate remarkable continuity in Neanderthal technological traditions throughout the final occupation phases. Stone tool production maintained the characteristic levallois reduction techniques and tool morphologies that had characterized Neanderthal industries for tens of thousands of years. The consistency of these technological traditions suggests that late surviving populations maintain cultural knowledge and manufacturing skills despite their geographic isolation and presumed small population sizes. Subsistence evidence from Gorham's Cave reveals sophisticated exploitation of Mediterranean coastal environments that supplemented traditional hunting strategies with systematic collection of marine resources. Shell middens within the cave deposits contain remains of limpets, mussels, and other intertidal species that provided reliable protein sources during periods when terrestrial game was scarce. The processing techniques evident from shell fragments and associated tools demonstrate detailed knowledge of optimal collection timing and preparation methods for marine foods. The faunal assemblages from late Neanderthal sites across Iberia reveal adaptation to changing prey availability as climatic conditions shifted toward full glacial conditions. Traditional prey species, including red deer, ibex, and wild boar, remained important components of the diet, but archaeological evidence indicates increased exploitation of smaller animals, including rabbits, birds, and reptiles, that may have been more readily available as larger game populations declined. This dietary diversification demonstrates behavioral flexibility that enabled survival despite resource limitations. The willingness and ability to exploit smaller prey species indicates that late Neanderthal populations were not rigidly specialized hunters unable to adapt to changing conditions. They were flexible opportunists who adjusted their strategies based on available resources. Climate change during the final phases of Neanderthal occupation created additional stresses that compounded existing demographic and competitive pressures. The transition toward full glacial conditions between 40,000 and 30,000 years ago brought cooler temperatures, reduced precipitation, and vegetation changes that affected prey animal populations and plant food availability. Archaeological evidence indicates that some refugial areas that had previously supported stable populations became marginal or uninhabitable as environmental conditions deteriorated. The Campanian ignimbrite volcanic eruption, occurring approximately 39,280 years ago, created catastrophic environmental disruption across southeastern Europe that may have eliminated Neanderthal populations in the Balkans and eastern Mediterranean regions. Volcanic ash deposits up to several meters thick buried vegetation and contaminated water sources across extensive areas, while the associated climatic cooling created additional stress for surviving populations. The timing of this eruption coincides closely with the disappearance of Neanderthal populations from many Eastern European sites. Population fragmentation during the final millennia reduced the viability of individual groups and limited their ability to respond effectively to environmental challenges. Archaeological evidence suggests that late Neanderthal populations became increasingly isolated within their refugial territories, with reduced evidence for long-distance transport of raw materials and decreased diversity in tool assemblages. This isolation may have led to breakdown of cultural transmission systems and loss of technological knowledge that had previously enabled successful adaptation to environmental challenges. Competition with expanding modern human populations created additional pressures that may have accelerated Neanderthal population decline through direct territorial displacement and resource competition. Archaeological evidence indicates that modern human populations established settlements in regions adjacent to Neanderthal refugia, potentially limiting access to crucial resources and territory. The demographic advantages of modern human populations, including larger group sizes and more extensive territorial networks, may have provided competitive advantages that gradually reduced Neanderthal territorial holdings. The genetic contributions of Neanderthals to modern human populations outside Africa represent their most enduring legacy, with genomic analysis revealing that contemporary non-African populations carry 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. This genetic inheritance includes functional variants that continue to influence traits including immune system function, skin pigmentation, hair texture, and metabolic processes. The selective retention of certain Neanderthal genetic variants demonstrates their continued adaptive value in modern human populations, particularly those living in northern latitudes where Neanderthal adaptations to cold climates provide ongoing benefits. Immune system genes represent the most significant category of Neanderthal genetic contributions to modern humans, with variants affecting the HLA complex and other immune functions providing enhanced resistance to pathogens encountered during human expansion into new environments. These genetic contributions may have been crucial for modern human survival and successful colonization of diverse global environments, demonstrating that Neanderthal modern human hybridization provided functional benefits that enhanced human evolutionary success. The study of Neanderthals continues to provide crucial insights into human evolution, adaptation, and the factors that influence the survival and extinction of hominin populations. Their remarkable success across vast temporal and geographic scales, followed by their ultimate disappearance, offers important lessons about the complex interactions between environmental change, demographic processes, and evolutionary pressures that shape the trajectory of human lineages. As the closest evolutionary relatives of modern humans, Neanderthals represent an irreplaceable window into our shared evolutionary heritage and the diverse pathways that human evolution has explored throughout its remarkable history. Their extinction reminds us that evolutionary success is never permanent, that adaptation to specific conditions can become a liability when those conditions change, and that even the most successful species can disappear when faced with the right combination of environmental stress, demographic pressure, and competition. Yet their genetic legacy lives on in billions of modern humans, a testament to the complex and intertwined nature of human evolutionary history. The Neanderthals are gone, but they are not forgotten. They live on in our genes, in our scientific understanding, and in our appreciation for the remarkable diversity of human evolutionary pathways. The environmental crucible, climate adaptation and survival strategies, the survival of Neanderthal populations across more than 300,000 years of European and Western Asian occupation required extraordinary adaptive capabilities to withstand the dramatic environmental fluctuations that characterized the Middle and Late Pleistocene epochs. These populations endured at least 20 major glacial-interglacial cycles, each bringing radical transformations to the landscapes they inhabited. During glacial maxima, massive ice sheets advanced southward from Scandinavia, covering much of northern Europe in ice kilometers thick, while permafrost extended hundreds of kilometers beyond the glacial margins. Temperatures plummeted to levels 10 to 15 degrees Celsius below modern averages, creating tundra steppe environments where only the hardiest plants and animals could survive. The wind chill factor in these exposed landscapes could drop effective temperatures to minus 40 degrees Celsius or lower, conditions that would kill an unprotected human within hours. Yet Neanderthals not only survived these conditions, they thrived, establishing populations across these frozen wastelands and developing technologies that enabled them to extract resources from environments that seemed utterly inhospitable. The last glacial maximum, occurring approximately 26,500 years ago, exemplified the extreme conditions that Neanderthal populations had weathered repeatedly throughout their evolutionary history. Ice sheets extended across Britain, Scandinavia, and much of northern Germany, creating a landscape dominated by periglacial processes, including freeze-thaw cycles, solifluction, and widespread permafrost development. The tree line retreated southward by 1,000 kilometers or more, eliminating the temperate forest that had provided crucial resources during warmer periods. Annual temperatures in Central Europe averaged -5 to -10 degrees Celsius, with winter temperatures dropping below -30 for extended periods. These glacial environments demanded sophisticated behavioral adaptations that enabled Neanderthal groups to maintain viable populations despite resource scarcity and extreme cold stress. The archaeological evidence reveals populations that didn't merely endure these conditions, they mastered them, developing specialized technologies and strategies that turned the frozen landscape into a productive hunting ground. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Moldova and Ukraine reveals specialized winter habitation structures, constructed from mammoth bones, and hides that provided insulated shelters capable of retaining heat generated by central hearths. The bone frameworks of these structures incorporated interlocking mammoth skulls, long bones, and tusks, arranged to create dome-shaped dwellings measuring 4 to 6 meters in diameter. Hide coverings secured over these frameworks created windproof barriers that trapped warm air while allowing smoke ventilation through carefully positioned openings. The construction of these shelters required coordinated group efforts to transport and position mammoth bones weighing hundreds of kilograms each. Archaeological analysis reveals systematic selection of specific bone elements based on their structural properties and dimensions, with skulls serving as foundation elements while long bones provided vertical supports and curved tusks created the dome framework. The engineering principles underlying these constructions demonstrate sophisticated understanding of structural mechanics and thermodynamics that enabled creation of effective cold weather housing using available materials. The interior organization of these bone structures reveals careful planning for thermal efficiency and functional space allocation. Central hearths positioned for optimal heat distribution, sleeping platforms elevated above cold ground surfaces, and storage areas for food and equipment demonstrate sophisticated understanding of thermal management and space utilization. The smoke ventilation systems incorporated into these structures prevented carbon monoxide accumulation while minimizing heat loss, a delicate balance that required detailed understanding of airflow dynamics and combustion processes. During interglacial periods, rising temperatures triggered rapid environmental transformations that presented different but equally challenging adaptive requirements. The retreat of ice sheets and expansion of deciduous forests created opportunities for population growth and territorial expansion, but also introduced new competitive pressures from expanding plant and animal communities. Archaeological evidence indicates that Neanderthal populations responded to these changes through rapid territorial expansion northward, recolonizing previously glaciated regions as soon as environmental conditions permitted sustainable habitation. The Eemian interglacial, lasting from approximately 130,000 to 115,000 years ago, created environmental conditions significantly warmer than present-day Europe, with temperatures averaging 2 to 3 degrees Celsius above modern levels. Dense temperate forests dominated the landscape from southern Spain to Scandinavia, supporting diverse animal communities that included straight-tusked elephants, forest rhinoceros, hippopotamus, and numerous deer species. These warm, forested environments required different subsistence strategies and technological adaptations compared to the open tundra steppe conditions that characterized glacial periods. Neanderthal populations demonstrated remarkable flexibility in adapting their hunting strategies to exploit the diverse prey species available during interglacial periods. Forest environments supported smaller, more solitary prey animals that required different procurement techniques compared to the herd animals of glacial steppes. Archaeological assemblages from interglacial sites show increased frequencies of deer, wild boar, and other forest-adapted species, along with technological modifications including lighter projectile points and specialized processing tools adapted for woodland hunting conditions. The transition periods between glacial and interglacial phases created particularly challenging conditions as rapidly changing environments disrupted established resource bases and territorial boundaries. Archaeological evidence suggests that these transitional periods triggered population movements and cultural changes as groups adapted to shifting resource availability and environmental conditions. Site abandonment patterns indicate systematic responses to environmental deterioration, with populations retreating to refugial areas during adverse conditions and expanding during favorable periods. The Younger Dryas stadial, occurring approximately 12,900 to 11,700 years ago, represented one of the most dramatic short-term climate reversals documented in the geological record. This rapid cooling event, triggered by disruption of North Atlantic circulation patterns, returned much of Europe to near-glacial conditions within decades. While this event occurred after Neanderthal extinction, similar rapid climate shifts throughout the Pleistocene would have created comparable challenges that tested the adaptive capabilities of Neanderthal populations. Volcanic catastrophes represented another category of environmental challenge that Neanderthal populations encountered throughout their evolutionary history. The Campanian ignimbrite eruption, occurring approximately 39,280 years ago, ranks among the largest volcanic events of the past 200,000 years and coincided closely with the final phases of Neanderthal occupation in Europe. This massive eruption, originating from the Campi Flegrei caldera near Naples, ejected an estimated 300 cubic kilometers of volcanic material into the atmosphere, creating widespread environmental disruption across southeastern Europe and the eastern Mediterranean region. The immediate effects of the Campanian ignimbrite eruption included deposition of volcanic ash layers up to several meters thick across the Balkans, with significant ashfall extending into Central Europe and Western Asia. Archaeological sites in Romania, Bulgaria, and Greece contain distinct tephra layers that mark this eruption event, providing precise chronological markers for late Neanderthal occupation. The ash deposits show evidence of rapid accumulation that would have buried vegetation, contaminated water sources, and created respiratory hazards for human and animal populations. The climatic effects of the Campanian ignimbrite eruption extended far beyond the immediate ashfall zone through injection of sulfur compounds into the stratosphere. These aerosols created a global cooling effect that lasted several years, reducing temperatures by an estimated 2 to 4 degrees Celsius across Europe during a period when Neanderthal populations were already under stress from advancing glacial conditions. The combination of direct environmental damage and prolonged cooling created a cascade of ecological disruptions that eliminated many plant and animal species from affected regions. Archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthal populations in southeastern Europe experienced severe population declines following the Campanian ignimbrite eruption. Sites in the Balkans show evidence of abandonment around this time period, with subsequent occupations representing different cultural traditions associated with modern human populations. The correlation between volcanic ash deposition and site abandonment patterns suggests that the eruption created environmental conditions that exceeded the adaptive capabilities of local Neanderthal populations. Adaptation to diverse ecosystems across the Neanderthal range required sophisticated understanding of ecological relationships and resource management strategies. Populations inhabiting Mediterranean environments developed subsistence strategies that exploited seasonal abundance patterns in plant and animal resources, with archaeological evidence indicating systematic collection of nuts, berries, and other plant foods during autumn months. Coastal populations incorporated marine resources including shellfish, fish, and marine mammals into their dietary repertoires, requiring specialized technologies and knowledge systems for effective exploitation. The tundra steppe environments of glacial period supported different ecological communities dominated by large herbivores, including mammoth, woolly rhinoceros, reindeer, and bison. These ecosystems provided high biomass concentrations of large prey animals but required specialized hunting technologies and group coordination for successful procurement. Archaeological evidence indicates that Neanderthal populations developed sophisticated strategies for exploiting these resources, including seasonal migration following prey herds and establishment of specialized hunting camps at strategic locations. Temperate forest environments during interglacial periods created fragmented landscapes with diverse microhabitats that supported varied plant and animal communities. These ecosystems required different resource management strategies compared to the more homogeneous tundra steppe environments, with populations needing to exploit scattered resource patches across forested territories. Archaeological assemblages from forest environments show greater diversity in tool types and prey species, reflecting adaptation to more complex ecological conditions. Mountain environments presented unique challenges related to altitude, seasonal snow cover, and limited growing seasons that affected both plant and animal productivity. Neanderthal populations occupying mountain valleys and high-altitude caves developed specialized adaptations for extreme cold and limited resource availability. Archaeological sites in the Pyrenees, Alps, and Caucasus Mountains reveal evidence of seasonal occupation patterns that tracked resource availability and weather conditions throughout annual cycles. The convergence of Neanderthal and modern human populations in the Levantine corridor approximately 100,000 years ago marked the beginning of one of the most significant encounters in human evolutionary history. These initial contact zones created complex demographic dynamics as two distinct hominin lineages encountered each other across landscapes that could support only limited population densities. The Taban cave sequence provides crucial stratigraphic evidence for alternating occupations by Neanderthal and modern human populations over a span of approximately 50,000 years. Layer C contains classic Neanderthal remains associated with Mousterian tool assemblages, while overlying deposits yield modern human fossils accompanied by different technological traditions. The repeated occupation of the same cave system by different hominin populations suggests territorial competition and displacement events that characterized early interaction periods in the Levant. The stratigraphic complexity of these sites indicates that the relationship between Neanderthals and modern humans was not a simple replacement, but rather a complex mosaic of coexistence, competition, and possibly cooperation. Kibber Cave presents additional evidence for this complex occupation history, with Neanderthal remains dating to approximately 60,000 years ago, found in deposits that also contain technological elements more commonly associated with modern human populations. The mixing of cultural traditions within single archaeological contexts indicates either direct contact between populations or rapid territorial succession that left mixed assemblages in repeatedly occupied sites. The preservation conditions at Kibara enabled detailed analysis of both skeletal remains and cultural materials that document the transition between different occupational phases. The expansion of modern human populations into Europe beginning around 45,000 years ago created the most extensive and prolonged period of coexistence between the two species. Archaeological sites across the continent document a complex mosaic of occupation patterns as modern humans advanced westward from the Danube corridor, while Neanderthal populations maintained territories in Western and Southern European refugia. The Aurignacian technological tradition associated with early modern Europeans appears first in southeastern Europe before spreading rapidly across the continent, often overlying Mousterian deposits in cave sequences. The Châtel-Perronian industry, documented at sites such as Grotte du Renne in France, represents one of the most intriguing aspects of Neanderthal-modern human interaction. This technological tradition combines elements of traditional Mousterian tool production with innovations including blade technology and bone tool manufacturing that were previously associated exclusively with modern human populations. The appearance of these hybrid technologies in contexts containing Neanderthal remains suggests either independent innovation by Neanderthal populations or cultural transmission through contact with modern human groups. Radiocarbon dating of Châtel-Perronian sites indicates contemporaneity with early Aurignacian occupations in the same geographic regions, confirming that Neanderthal and modern human populations coexisted in France for several thousand years. The technological similarities between late Châtel-Perronian and early Aurignacian assemblages suggest cultural exchange that influenced tool production methods in both populations. However, the direction and mechanism of this technological transfer remains subjects of ongoing archaeological debate. The demographic implications of population contact become evident through analysis of site distribution patterns and occupation intensities during the transition period. Modern human sites show evidence of larger group sizes and more intensive occupation compared to contemporary Neanderthal settlements, suggesting demographic advantages that may have influenced competitive outcomes. Archaeological assemblages from Aurignacian sites contain greater artifact densities and more diverse tool types compared to Mousterian assemblages, indicating either larger populations or different organizational strategies that increased material culture production. Competitive pressures for territorial resources intensified as modern human populations expanded into regions that had supported stable Neanderthal communities for thousands of years. The overlap in subsistence strategies between the two populations created direct competition for hunting territories, raw material sources, and suitable cave sites that provided shelter during harsh winter months. Archaeological evidence indicates that prime territorial locations changed hands repeatedly during the transition period, with some sites showing alternating occupations by different populations over relatively short time intervals. The Vézère Valley in southwestern France exemplifies these competitive dynamics, with numerous caves containing stratigraphic sequences that document the replacement of Mousterian by Aurignacian occupations within a geographically restricted area. Sites such as Aubry-Pétot and La Forêt show clear transitions from Neanderthal to modern human occupation, often with sterile layers indicating periods of abandonment between different occupational phases. The concentration of high-quality flint sources in this region made it particularly valuable territory that attracted repeated occupation attempts by both populations. Genetic analysis of ancient DNA extracted from Neanderthal and early modern human remains has revolutionized understanding of biological interactions between these populations. Initial sequencing of the Neanderthal genome revealed that non-African modern human populations carry 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA, providing direct evidence for interbreeding between the species. This genetic legacy appears in all modern human populations outside Africa, indicating that hybridization occurred before the global expansion of modern humans, rather than through multiple independent contact events. The distribution of Neanderthal genetic variants within modern human genomes reveals complex patterns that reflect both the timing and geographic context of interbreeding events. Certain chromosomal regions show higher concentrations of Neanderthal ancestry, while others appear to have been actively selected against during subsequent evolution. The X chromosome contains significantly less Neanderthal DNA than autosomes, suggesting reduced fertility or survival of male hybrids, a pattern consistent with Haldane's rule regarding hybrid fitness in closely related species. Functional analysis of Neanderthal genetic variants that persist in modern populations reveals their continued adaptive value in certain environments and contexts. Variants affecting immune system function appear to have provided advantages for populations expanding into new disease environments, while others influence skin pigmentation and hair texture in ways that may have been beneficial in northern latitudes. The selective retention of these variants demonstrates that hybridization contributed functional genetic diversity that enhanced modern human adaptability. The geographic pattern of Neanderthal ancestry in modern populations provides insights into the timing and location of interbreeding events. Populations in Europe and Asia show similar levels of Neanderthal ancestry despite their geographic separation, suggesting that most hybridization occurred during early expansion phases rather than through continued contact in Europe. However, some European populations show slightly elevated Neanderthal ancestry, indicating additional hybridization events during the extended coexistence period in Western Europe. Recent analysis of ancient DNA from early modern European populations has revealed temporal changes in Neanderthal ancestry that reflect population movements and genetic drift during the Paleolithic. Some early European modern humans carried higher levels of Neanderthal DNA than present-day populations, indicating subsequent dilution through population expansion and mixing. These patterns suggest that the genetic legacy of Neanderthal modern human hybridization was more extensive immediately following contact than the current distribution indicates. Archaeological evidence for direct cultural exchange between Neanderthal and modern human populations emerges through analysis of technological innovations and symbolic behaviors that appear in both traditions during the contact period. The appearance of bone tools, personal ornaments, and pigment use in late Neanderthal contexts parallels similar developments in early modern human assemblages, suggesting either independent innovation or cultural transmission through observation and imitation. The production of bone tools represents a particularly significant technological development that appears in both Châtelperronian and Aurignacian contexts. These implements require different manufacturing techniques compared to traditional stone tool production, involving careful selection of appropriate bones, systematic shaping through abrasion and carving, and often complex hafting arrangements. The similarity in bone tool morphology between late Neanderthal and early modern human assemblages suggests shared technological knowledge or parallel development of similar solutions to functional problems. Personal ornament production shows even more striking parallels between late Neanderthal and early modern human populations. Perforated shells, carved bone pendants, and modified animal teeth appear in both cultural contexts with similar manufacturing techniques and wear patterns. The transport of marine shells to inland sites located hundreds of kilometers from coastal sources indicates that both populations maintained extensive territorial networks that enabled acquisition of exotic materials for symbolic purposes. Pigment use intensifies dramatically in both Neanderthal and modern human sites during the contact period, with archaeological evidence indicating systematic collection and processing of ochre and other colorants. The grinding stones and processing techniques used for pigment preparation show remarkable similarity between different populations, suggesting either shared knowledge or convergent development of optimal processing methods. The increased frequency of pigment finds during this period may reflect intensified symbolic activities related to group identity maintenance during periods of territorial competition. The scientific discovery and study of Neanderthals began with the recovery of the first recognized specimen from the Neander Valley in Germany during August 1856. Limestone quarrying operations in the Feldhofer cave exposed skeletal remains that were initially misinterpreted as belonging to a pathological modern human or ancient warrior. The distinctive morphological features of the skull, including prominent brow ridges, low cranial vault, and robust construction, challenged contemporary understanding of human evolution and sparked decades of scientific debate about the antiquity and significance of these remains. Johann Karl Fuhlrott, a local teacher and naturalist, recognized the potential importance of the Neander Valley discovery and collaborated with anatomist Hermann Schaffhausen to conduct the first scientific analysis of Neanderthal remains. Their 1857 publication describing the fossils as representing an extinct human species predating modern populations established the foundation for subsequent paleoanthropological research. However, the interpretation of these remains as representing a distinct species remained controversial for decades, with prominent scientists including Rudolf Virchow arguing that the morphological differences resulted from pathological conditions rather than evolutionary divergence. The acceptance of Neanderthals as a legitimate extinct human species gained momentum through subsequent discoveries at sites throughout Europe during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The La Chapelle-aux-Saints discovery in 1908 provided the first relatively complete Neanderthal skeleton, enabling detailed anatomical comparisons with modern humans. Marcelin Boule's comprehensive analysis of this specimen, while containing some interpretive errors regarding posture and locomotion, established many of the morphological characteristics that define Neanderthal anatomy. The Spy Cave discoveries in Belgium during 1886 provided crucial evidence for the geological antiquity of Neanderthal remains through their clear association with extinct Pleistocene fauna and stone tools. The stratigraphic context of these fossils demonstrated that Neanderthals had lived alongside woolly mammoths, cave bears, and other extinct species, confirming their great antiquity and supporting interpretations of them as representing an extinct human lineage rather than pathological modern humans. Technological advances in dating methods during the mid-20th century revolutionized Neanderthal chronology and enabled precise temporal placement of fossil discoveries within Pleistocene geological sequences. Radiocarbon dating, developed during the 1940s, provided the first reliable absolute dates for late Neanderthal sites and confirmed their extinction by approximately 28,000 years ago. Subsequent developments in uranium-thorium dating, electron spin resonance, and other techniques extended the chronological framework for earlier Neanderthal sites and established the temporal depth of their evolutionary lineage. The development of ancient DNA analysis during the 1990s opened unprecedented opportunities for studying Neanderthal genetics and evolutionary relationships. The first successful extraction of mitochondrial DNA from Neanderthal bone samples provided direct genetic evidence for their distinctiveness from modern humans while confirming their close evolutionary relationship. Initial mitochondrial DNA sequences revealed genetic distances that supported species-level separation between Neanderthals and modern humans, though subsequent nuclear DNA analysis has complicated these interpretations. The completion of the first Neanderthal genome sequence in 2010 represented a watershed moment in paleoanthropological research, providing comprehensive genetic data that revolutionized understanding of Neanderthal biology and evolutionary relationships. The genomic analysis revealed evidence for interbreeding between Neanderthals and modern humans, demonstrating that these populations were not completely reproductively isolated despite their morphological and cultural differences. This discovery fundamentally altered interpretations of human evolution and the relationship between different Pleistocene hominin populations. Advances in ancient DNA extraction and sequencing techniques continue to expand the database of Neanderthal genetic information, with successful DNA recovery from increasingly old and degraded specimens. Recent technical developments have enabled genetic analysis of specimens over 400,000 years old, extending the temporal range of ancient DNA studies deep into Neanderthal evolutionary history. These advances promise to provide detailed insights into population structure, migration patterns, and evolutionary processes that shape Neanderthal populations throughout their existence. Computational modeling and simulation approaches have enhanced understanding of Neanderthal extinction processes by integrating archaeological, genetic, and environmental data within demographic frameworks. These models explore various extinction scenarios including climate change, competition with modern humans, demographic stochasticity, and volcanic catastrophes to assess their relative contributions to Neanderthal population decline. The results suggest that multiple factors likely interacted to create the conditions that led to Neanderthal extinction, rather than any single cause being solely responsible. Modern analytical techniques including isotopic analysis, microscopic examination of dental calculus, and biomolecular archaeology continue to reveal new aspects of Neanderthal behavior and ecology. Stable isotope analysis of bone collagen provides detailed information about dietary patterns and mobility, while dental calculus preserves microscopic evidence of plant consumption and environmental conditions. These approaches complement traditional archaeological methods by providing direct evidence for behaviors and environmental interactions that leave minimal traces in conventional archaeological assemblages. The integration of multiple analytical approaches within interdisciplinary research frameworks has transformed understanding of Neanderthal capabilities and achievements. Rather than the primitive, brutish stereotypes that dominated early interpretations, contemporary research reveals sophisticated populations with complex technologies, symbolic behaviors, and adaptive capabilities that enabled successful survival in challenging Pleistocene environments for hundreds of thousands of years. Their extinction represents the loss of a remarkable human lineage that contributed significantly to the evolutionary heritage of contemporary human populations, while demonstrating alternative pathways for human cultural and biological development. The Neanderthals were not evolutionary failures. They were extraordinarily successful for over 400,000 years, far longer than modern humans have existed as a distinct species. Their disappearance reminds us that evolutionary success is never permanent, that adaptation to specific conditions can become a liability when those conditions change, and that even the most successful species can disappear when faced with the right combination of environmental stress, demographic pressure, and competition. Yet their genetic legacy lives on in billions of modern humans, a testament to the complex and intertwined nature of human evolutionary history. The Neanderthals are gone, but they are not forgotten. They live on in our genes, in our scientific understanding, and in our appreciation for the remarkable diversity of human evolutionary pathways. Every time we fight off an infection using immune system genes inherited from Neanderthals, every time we adapt to cold climates using metabolic variants they bequeathed us, we are reminded that human evolution is not a simple linear progression, but a complex web of interactions, hybridizations, and shared heritage that connects us to our extinct cousins across the vast expanse of evolutionary time. The story of the Neanderthals does not end with their extinction 40,000 years ago. Instead, it continues to unfold in laboratories, archaeological sites, and even within our own bodies, revealing layer upon layer of complexity that challenges our understanding of what it means to be human. The Neanderthals represent not a dead end in human evolution, but rather a parallel branch that merged with our own, contributing genetic material, cultural innovations, and evolutionary lessons that remain relevant to contemporary humanity. The genetic legacy of Neanderthals extends far beyond the simple statistic that non-African modern humans carry 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. This genetic inheritance influences numerous aspects of modern human biology in ways that scientists are only beginning to understand. Recent genomic studies have identified specific Neanderthal gene variants that affect immune system function, skin and hair characteristics, circadian rhythms, pain sensitivity, and even susceptibility to certain diseases. These genetic contributions represent the accumulated wisdom of hundreds of thousands of years of adaptation to Eurasian environments, evolutionary solutions to environmental challenges that modern humans inherited through interbreeding. The immune system genes inherited from Neanderthals have proven particularly significant for modern human populations. Variants of the HLA, human leukocyte antigen, genes, which play crucial roles in recognizing and responding to pathogens, show clear Neanderthal ancestry in many modern populations. These variants likely provided early modern humans with enhanced resistance to diseases they encountered as they expanded into new environments outside Africa. The Neanderthals, having lived in Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years, had evolved immune responses to local pathogens, responses that modern humans could acquire through interbreeding rather than waiting for new mutations to arise through natural selection. This genetic exchange represents a form of adaptive introgression, the transfer of beneficial genetic variants from one species to another through hybridization. Rather than starting from scratch and adapting to Eurasian diseases, modern humans could essentially download pre-tested immune system upgrades from Neanderthal populations that had already solved these adaptive challenges. This process may have accelerated modern human expansion across Eurasia by providing immediate protection against diseases that might otherwise have decimated immigrant populations. Skin and hair characteristics also show Neanderthal influence in modern populations. Genetic variants affecting skin pigmentation, hair color, and hair texture that originated in Neanderthals persist in contemporary Europeans and Asians. These variants likely provided adaptive advantages in northern latitudes where reduced sunlight intensity affected vitamin D synthesis, and where different hair and skin characteristics might have offered advantages for thermal regulation or UV protection. The retention of these variants through tens of thousands of years of evolution demonstrates their continued adaptive value in modern populations. Circadian rhythm genes, those that regulate sleep-wake cycles and other daily biological rhythms, also show Neanderthal ancestry in modern populations. These variants may have helped modern humans adapt to the different day-length patterns they encountered as they moved into higher latitudes. The Neanderthals, having lived at northern latitudes for hundreds of thousands of years, had evolved circadian systems adapted to the extreme seasonal variations in daylight hours characteristic of these regions. Modern humans inheriting these variants gained pre-adapted biological clocks suited to their new environments. Even pain sensitivity shows Neanderthal influence, with recent studies identifying a Neanderthal gene variant that affects pain perception through its influence on ion channels in nerve cells. Individuals carrying this variant show altered pain thresholds compared to those without it, a reminder that our subjective experiences of the world may be influenced by genetic contributions from our extinct cousins. This finding raises fascinating questions about how Neanderthals experienced their world and whether their sensory perceptions differed from those of modern humans in ways that affected their behavior and culture. The distribution of Neanderthal ancestry across modern human genomes reveals a complex pattern of selection and drift that has shaped which Neanderthal variants persisted and which were eliminated. Certain genomic regions show elevated Neanderthal ancestry, indicating positive selection for beneficial variants, while others show reduced or absent Neanderthal DNA, suggesting that some Neanderthal variants were deleterious in modern human genetic backgrounds. The X chromosome shows particularly low Neanderthal ancestry, consistent with Haldane's rule that hybrid incompatibilities often affect the heterogametic sex, males and mammals, more severely than the homogametic sex. Regions of the genome associated with brain development and function show reduced Neanderthal ancestry, suggesting that some Neanderthal variants affecting cognition were incompatible with modern human brain development. This pattern indicates that despite the overall success of Neanderthal modern human hybridization, there were limits to genetic compatibility, particularly in systems as complex and finely tuned as brain development. The cognitive differences between Neanderthals and modern humans, while subtle, may have been significant enough that hybrid individuals carrying certain combinations of Neanderthal brain development genes suffered reduced fitness. The cultural legacy of Neanderthals extends beyond their genetic contributions to encompass the technological and behavioral innovations they developed during their long evolutionary history. Many of the technologies that characterized the Middle Paleolithic period, prepared core techniques, composite tools, controlled use of fire, systematic hunting strategies, were developed or perfected by Neanderthal populations. These innovations represent solutions to survival challenges that required sophisticated cognitive abilities, detailed planning, and accumulated cultural knowledge passed down through generations. The Levallois technique, which Neanderthals mastered and employed for hundreds of thousands of years, represents a level of technological sophistication that requires advanced cognitive abilities, including mental rotation, sequential planning, and understanding of fracture mechanics. The fact that this technology persisted across vast geographic ranges and temporal spans indicates successful cultural transmission systems that maintain technical knowledge within Neanderthal populations. Modern humans entering Europe encountered populations with deep technological traditions and accumulated expertise in surviving harsh environments, knowledge that may have been transmitted through observation, imitation, or direct teaching during the period of coexistence. The symbolic behaviors documented in late Neanderthal sites, burial practices, pigment use, ornament production, demonstrate cognitive capabilities that were once thought to be uniquely modern human traits. The discovery of these behaviors in Neanderthal contexts has forced reconsideration of what defines human cognitive modernity and whether the capacity for symbolic thought emerged once in a common ancestor or evolved independently in different hominin lineages. The parallel development of similar symbolic behaviors in both Neanderthals and modern humans suggests that these capabilities may be inherent to large-brained hominins with complex social structures rather than representing a unique modern human innovation. The care for disabled individuals documented in Neanderthal skeletal remains reveals social values and emotional capacities that resonate with modern human ethics. The investment of resources in maintaining individuals who could not contribute to group survival indicates compassion, loyalty, and social bonds that transcended utilitarian calculations. These behaviors suggest that Neanderthals possessed the emotional depth and social complexity necessary for maintaining cohesive communities through mutual support and shared responsibility, qualities that we recognize as fundamentally human. The extinction of Neanderthals raises profound questions about the factors that determine evolutionary success and the vulnerability of even highly successful species to changing conditions. For over 400,000 years, Neanderthals thrived across Eurasia, successfully adapting to multiple glacial cycles and diverse environments. Yet within a few thousand years of modern human arrival in Europe, they disappeared. This rapid extinction following such prolonged success suggests that the factors leading to their demise were complex and multifaceted, rather than reflecting simple inferiority to modern humans. Climate change, demographic factors, competition with modern humans, volcanic catastrophes, and genetic factors likely all contributed to Neanderthal extinction in ways that interacted and reinforced each other. The Campanian ignimbrite eruption may have eliminated populations in southeastern Europe, creating a demographic bottleneck that reduced genetic diversity and population viability. Advancing glacial conditions may have compressed suitable habitat, forcing populations into refugia where they faced increased competition with modern humans for limited resources. Smaller population sizes may have led to inbreeding depression and loss of genetic diversity that reduced adaptive potential. The demographic advantages of modern human populations, larger group sizes, more extensive social networks, possibly higher birth rates, may have provided competitive advantages that gradually reduced Neanderthal territorial holdings and population sizes. Even small differences in demographic parameters, when sustained over thousands of years, can lead to dramatic shifts in population distributions and eventual extinction of the less successful population. The replacement of Neanderthals by modern humans may have been less a matter of direct conflict than a slow demographic process where modern human populations gradually expanded while Neanderthal populations contracted. The lessons from Neanderthal extinction remain relevant to contemporary concerns about biodiversity loss and species conservation. The Neanderthals demonstrate that evolutionary success is never permanent, that adaptation to specific conditions can become a liability when those conditions change, and that even highly intelligent, culturally sophisticated species can disappear when faced with the right combination of environmental stress and competition. Their extinction reminds us that no species, including our own, is immune to the forces that have driven countless other species to extinction throughout Earth's history. Yet the Neanderthals also demonstrate the power of hybridization and genetic exchange in evolution. Rather than representing complete extinction, the Neanderthals live on through their genetic contributions to modern human populations. This genetic legacy has provided modern humans with adaptive variants that continue to influence our biology and may have accelerated our adaptation to diverse environments across the globe. The Neanderthal story thus becomes not one of simple extinction, but of transformation and incorporation into the modern human lineage. The ongoing study of Neanderthals continues to yield new insights that challenge our understanding of human evolution and our place in nature. Each new discovery, whether a fossil, a genetic sequence, or an archaeological artifact, adds another piece to the puzzle of who the Neanderthals were and what their existence means for understanding human diversity and evolution. The Neanderthals represent our closest evolutionary relatives, a mirror in which we can see both our shared heritage and our distinctive characteristics. As we continue to unravel the Neanderthal story through advancing technologies and new discoveries, we gain not just knowledge about an extinct species, but insights into the nature of humanity itself. The Neanderthals challenge us to reconsider what makes us human, whether the traits we consider uniquely human are truly unique, and how we should understand the relationship between different human lineages. They remind us that human evolution is not a simple linear progression, but a complex web of divergence, convergence, and hybridization that has produced the remarkable diversity of human forms and cultures throughout our evolutionary history. The Neanderthals are gone, but they are not forgotten. They live on in our genes, carrying forward the evolutionary wisdom accumulated over hundreds of thousands of years of adaptation to Eurasian environments. They live on in our scientific understanding, providing crucial insights into human evolution and the factors that shape species success and extinction. They live on in our cultural consciousness, challenging our assumptions about human uniqueness and reminding us of the diverse pathways that human evolution has explored. And they live on in our appreciation for the remarkable complexity of human evolutionary history. A history that includes not just our direct ancestors, but also our extinct cousins who contributed to making us who we are today. The story of the Neanderthals is ultimately a story about us, about where we came from, how we became what we are, and what it means to be human in a world where humanity has taken many forms. As we face our own challenges in a rapidly changing world, the Neanderthals offer both warnings and inspiration. Warnings about the vulnerability of even successful species to environmental change and competition, and inspiration from their remarkable achievements in surviving and thriving for hundreds of thousands of years in some of the most challenging environments on Earth. Their legacy endures, woven into the fabric of modern humanity, a testament to the complex and intertwined nature of human evolutionary history.